Kurt Cobain was in the ninth row. Nobody had introduced him. Nobody had announced him. He had come because Chris Novoselic's younger cousin was performing in the showcase, and Chris had asked him the week before, with the casual ease of someone who doesn't expect to be refused. Just a school thing. You don't have to stay long. Kurt had said yes the way he said yes to most things that didn't require him to be anyone in particular. He arrived in a flannel shirt, worn at both elbows, and a pair of jeans that had given up trying to look new somewhere around 1987. His hair was unwashed. He sat down in the ninth row and looked at the stage the way he looked at most things, with a quality of attention that was easy to mistake for absence. It was a Thursday afternoon in October 1990, and the gymnasium of Roosevelt High School in Seattle had been arranged for the annual Student Talent Showcase. Folding chairs in rows of 15, a temporary stage at the front, a sound system operated by a junior named Marcus, who had read the manual twice and was still uncertain about the equalizer settings. The room held perhaps 300 people: students, parents, two vice principals who had drawn the short straw, and a panel of three judges seated at a table to the right of the stage: a local music school instructor, a community theater director, and a man named Robert Aldis. Robert Aldis taught AP Music Theory at a private school across town. He had a master's degree in musicology, had studied under two people whose names he dropped with practice frequency, and had been judging student showcases for 11 years. He was not a cruel man. He was something more specific than cruel. He was certain. Certain about what music was, certain about what it required, certain about what separated the students who would develop from the students who would not. His feedback throughout the afternoon had been detailed and consistent. The feedback of someone who applies the same measurements to every performance, because the measurements are, in his view, the point. The showcase had been running for an hour and 40 minutes. There had been a flute solo, two vocal performances, a boy who played classical piano with the rigid precision of someone who has been told exactly how to hold his hands, and a dance trio from the junior class. The judges had scored each act and delivered comments through a microphone set up at the end of their table. The comments were useful, mostly, specific, the kind of feedback that would appear on a rubric. Then a girl named Amy Sellin walked onto the stage. Amy was 17, a senior, and had been writing songs since she was 12. She had a second-hand acoustic guitar with a replaced G-string and a voice that had developed entirely outside of any formal instruction, shaped by the music she listened to alone in her room and the things she needed to say that didn't fit any other container. She had written the songs she was about to perform over the course of the previous summer in the back of a notebook she carried everywhere, in the margins of her history textbook, on a paper bag once when the notebook wasn't there. She had not told anyone it was about her parents' divorce. She didn't think she needed to. She adjusted the microphone. She looked at the 300 people looking at her. She played. The song was 4 minutes long. Her guitar technique was self-taught and showed it. Her thumb wrapped around the neck in a way that no teacher would endorse, her strumming hand moving at an angle that sacrificed some efficiency for a quality of sound she had found by feel rather than by instruction. Her voice cracked once, in the second verse, at a moment that was either a flaw or exactly right, depending on what you believe music was for. The melody was simple. The words were not. They moved through the room with the specific weight of something true said plainly, without decoration, without the protective layer of technical sophistication that more trained performers use to put distance between themselves and what they were actually saying. When she finished, the gymnasium was quiet for 2 full seconds before it applauded. It was genuine applause, the kind that comes before people have decided to applaud, before they have consulted anything. 300 people responding to something that had reached them before they could evaluate whether it was supposed to. Robert Aldis clicked on his microphone. "Thank you, Amy." His voice was measured, the voice of someone who has learned to sound patient. "I want to give you some honest feedback, because I think it will serve you." He looked at his rubric. "Technically, there are real concerns. Your fretting hand position is going to limit your development. The thumb placement you're using creates tension that will prevent you from building speed and accuracy over time. Your intonation in the second verse drifted, and your voice, while it has some natural quality, is untrained in ways that are going to become more apparent as the material becomes more demanding. He paused. The song itself shows some effort, he continued, but lyrically it lacks the kind of structural sophistication that comes from studying the craft properly. What you're doing is essentially intuitive, and intuition without foundation only carries you so far. He set down his rubric. My honest recommendation is that if you're serious about this, you need to start with fundamentals. Proper vocal training, proper guitar instruction. What you've built on your own has enthusiasm, but enthusiasm without technique is a ceiling. He clicked off the microphone. Amy Sillen was still standing at the microphone. Her face had not changed in any visible, dramatic way. She was 17, and there were 300 people watching her, and she was not going to let her face change in any visible, dramatic way. But something had shifted in the quality of her stillness. The difference between standing in front of a room and standing in front of a verdict. In the ninth row, Kurt Cobain had been watching Robert Aldous deliver this assessment. He had been sitting with the specific stillness of someone who is listening very carefully to something he has a strong feeling about and has not yet decided what to do with that feeling. His hands were in his pockets. His eyes were on the judge's table. He waited until Aldous clicked off the microphone. Then he raised his hand. It was not a gesture that announced itself. A simple, quiet hand raised in the ninth row. The kind of thing that happens in classrooms without significance. But the quality of the pause that followed it suggested that something in the room had registered it before anyone could explain why. The teacher running the event, a young woman named Miss Park, who was managing the afternoon with a clipboard and visible anxiety, looked at him uncertainly. Did you have something? If that's okay, Kurt said. His voice was quiet. Not performing quietness. Just quiet. Robert Aldous looked over from the judge's table with the patient expression of someone who has encountered this before. The audience member who disagrees, who has opinions, who needs to say so. He folded his hands. Please, Ms. Park said. Kurt stood up. He didn't say his name. He didn't say where he was from or what he had done or what he knew. He said, the song she played had something in it that I've spent a lot of time trying to get into songs and don't always manage. The gymnasium was quiet. Amy Sillen, still on stage, was looking at him. The crack in her voice in the second verse. Kurt said, that wasn't a flaw. That was the song working. That's what a song sounds like when it's actually about something and the person singing it knows what that something is. He paused. Not for effect, because he was finding the words. You can train that quality out of a voice. You can smooth it, correct it, bring it inside the lines. And when you do, the voice will be more accurate and less true. Those aren't the same thing. He looked at Amy for a moment, then back at the general direction of the judge's table. The thumb position, the fretting hand, those are real. She should know about them. But the way she played that guitar is the reason the guitar sounded like that. The angle she uses on her strumming hand, the thing that's supposedly wrong, is part of what made the sound dry and direct instead of polished. That dryness was correct for the song. It was a choice, even if she didn't know she was making it. He sat back down. The gymnasium was still quiet, not the uncomfortable quiet of 3 minutes ago, when the verdict had landed and nobody knew what the appropriate response was. A different quality of quiet, the kind that happens when something has been said that the room needs a moment to hold. Robert Aldous leaned forward slightly toward the microphone. And you are? The boy sitting next to Kurt, Chris' cousin, a 15-year-old named Dario, who had recognized him the moment he walked in and had spent the last 2 hours trying to look like he hadn't, said the name at a volume that was meant to be quiet and wasn't. The room changed, not loudly, not with any single dramatic reaction. The way rooms change when a piece of information reorganizes everything in them simultaneously. A whisper moved through the rows. A parent in the 5th row turned to the parent beside her. 2 students near the back looked at each other. Someone near the aisle pulled out a disposable camera. Robert Aldous sat back in his chair. He was a professional. He had 11 years of experience judging these events. He had a master's degree in musicology and the names of 2 important teachers he could mention. He was, in this moment, not certain that any of it was especially relevant. Amy Sillen was still on stage. She was looking at the man in the 9th row with an expression that had moved through several configurations. Confusion, recognition, something that had not finished forming yet and had settled into a stillness that was different from the stillness of 4 minutes ago. Kurt didn't look up to find out what the room was doing with his name. He was looking at the stage. The talent show continued. There were two more acts, a comedy sketch from the sophomore class that went moderately well, and a boy who played trumpet with enough force to compensate for some inconsistency in his breath control. The judges scored them. Robert Aldous delivered his assessments with the same measured precision, though something in the delivery had changed in a way that was difficult to locate. A degree of certainty that had been present before, and was now fractionally not. Amy Seelan won no award that afternoon. Her scores from the panel placed her in the lower half of the rankings. Robert Aldous did not revise his technical assessment. He was not the kind of person who revised assessments because of who was sitting in the ninth row. After the show, in the corridor outside the gymnasium where the event was dissolving back into ordinary Thursday afternoon, students collecting their things, parents looking for their children, the AV club breaking down the sound system with the particular care of people who have been burned before. Amy Seelan found Kurt near the exit. She didn't say anything for a moment. She was holding her guitar case with both hands. "How did you know?" she said. "About the crack in the second verse." Kurt looked at her. "Because I've done it on purpose, and it never sounds as good as when it happens by accident." She was quiet. "The thing he said about technique," Kurt said, "he's not wrong that it matters. Find someone who can show you the fretting hand without making you feel like the fretting hand is the point." He looked at the guitar case. "But don't let anyone tell you that the crack was a problem. Figure out which parts of how you play are errors and which parts are yours. That takes a while. Don't let someone decide for you before you've had time to find out." The conversation lasted less than 5 minutes. Then Chris' cousin appeared from somewhere in the dispersing crowd, and the afternoon moved in the direction afternoons move. Amy Seelan kept writing. She played in small venues around Seattle through her early 20s. The kind of rooms where the door takes a cut of the door and the sound system is whatever it is and nobody's going to review it. She developed her technique, found a teacher who showed her the fretting hand without making her feel like the fretting hand was the point, and kept the crack in her voice, which turned out to be a feature rather than a flaw, or at least the kind of flaw that becomes your sound if you're patient with it. She eventually became a songwriter who worked primarily behind the scenes, writing for other artists and occasionally releasing her own work to modest but genuine attention. She never performed the songs she had played that afternoon again. She kept it. She kept it because of what had happened after she played it, and because it was the last song she wrote before she understood what she was doing, and she knew that once you understand what you're doing, you can't go back to writing from that particular place. In interviews over the years, she told the story occasionally. Not as the centerpiece, as a detail when the conversation reached the question of where she had learned what mattered. "Someone told me the crack in my voice was a flaw," she would say, "and someone else told me it was the song working. And I decided to believe the second person because he'd spent enough time trying to get that sound into his own music to know what it actually was." She never said the name. It didn't seem necessary. The people who needed to understand the story understood it without the name. Robert Aldous continued judging student showcases for several more years. He was by most accounts a good teacher, rigorous, prepared, genuinely interested in the development of his students. He thought about that afternoon occasionally, in the way that specific afternoons stay with you, not because they changed you dramatically, but because they introduced a small uncertainty into a certainty you had held for a long time. He didn't revise his view of technical fundamentals. He did, in the years that followed, add one question to the feedback he gave students before telling them what needed to be corrected. "What are you trying to say?" He asked it first and listened to the answer before he looked at the technique. It was a small adjustment. It changed, in a way that was difficult to measure, everything that followed from it. Kurt Cobain left the gymnasium that afternoon the same way he had arrived, without announcement, in a flannel shirt with worn elbows, carrying nothing. Chris Novoselic's cousin watched him go and thought about the 90 seconds in the ninth row for weeks afterward. The way the hand had gone up without urgency, the way he had waited until the judge was finished before he stood. Because waiting until the judge is finished is its own kind of statement. It says, What I have to say does not need to interrupt what you are saying to be true. It says, I am not here to win an argument. I am here because something was said in this room that I know something about, and the knowing is more important than the winning. Kurt Cobain had that quality long before the world knew what to do with his name. He had it in a gymnasium in Seattle in October 1990, in the ninth row, in a flannel shirt, waiting. And a 17-year-old girl who had been about to let someone else decide what her voice was worth kept going because of it.